My mom was here and I asked her if she'd record a podcast episode with me. I told her I'd pour her a glass of wine and we could just chat and cut anything out later if she would like to. And we had the most phenomenal conversation where I really asked her questions of, this is what I saw from my perspective, but what was this like for you? And the stories that happened before I was born, what was that like? And we dove into everything from her going through breast cancer to being a single mom after living in Haight-Ashbury in the height of the 60s, getting divorced and moving back to her home in Indiana as a single mom and starting law school, where she then met my father, to later getting kidnapped by someone they had worked with as newly graduated lawyers. So it's a phenomenal conversation. And if anything, I was like, I would just like to have this family piece of history. But with what we covered and to hear her different perspective on these things from someone in her generation, I found out she's the generation that's not named before baby boomers, and just what it was like for women and for her especially to go through all of those things. So enjoy this podcast. If you know someone that it would contribute to or lighten their world and give them strength, please do share it and enjoy. Welcome to the Shift Your Vibe to Thrive podcast. My name is Emily Evans Russell, and I'm a single mom, multiple six-figure business owner, and master mindset and energy coach. I created this podcast with two main targets. One, to give you practical tools so that no matter where you are in your life right now, you not only know that things can shift, but you know how to make them greater. And two, to change your frequency so that you become an energetic match for everything you desire. I'm talking your relationships, your finances, your success, all of it. Think of this podcast as your weekly energetic upgrade with a mix of subconscious mind hacks, ways to quantum leap, and consciousness shifts. A place where you learn to sculpt your reality and actually finally truly have the magical life you deserve and one that works for uniquely you. Are you ready to uplevel your reality? I think I hear yes, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. Thank you so much for being here. And now let's go to the show. I have you here, Mom, which I'm so glad I have you here. And I want to ask you a bunch of questions about your life that I know, I think
a little bit about,
but not a ton about. So for those of you listening, I grew up in Indiana with my mom and my dad, not in a family where we talked about energy or a lot of the topics you're going to hear on this podcast. But this podcast is all about people really having maybe difficult situations in their life, what others would see as difficult or challenging and things going on. And then they really shift something to have something greater on the other side. You have lots of stories like this that I'd like to hear more about. So
and I don't think I've shared them.
I know.
Not in the detail you want to know about now.
Yeah, exactly. So before you had me, you got married to your college sweetheart and then got divorced. And can you tell us a little bit about that? And then you ended up going to law school and meeting who is my father. But that was really different. And I would love to hear you talk a little bit about that, being a single mom and choosing to go to law school and kind of what that was like for you going through that.
Well, I got married the first time in 1961, a week after my graduation, if you can believe that.
Wow. In Indiana?
In Indiana.
And then when did you move to San Francisco?
Well, married in Indiana. My husband at that time then was at Purdue in engineering. And then he switched over to physics, and he got his master's degree in physics. And then he went back to electrical engineering. He said, this is not for me. So he started interviewing for jobs. And it was at a time, this was about 65, that a fellow like that had the degrees that he had, could just go wherever he wanted. He ended up making the choice, and he chose to go with IBM, and partly because it was in San Francisco. So back then, the companies were paying for everything, so they paid for our entire move out there.
And how old are you now? 24, maybe?
By this time, it's 65, so I'm 25.
Okay.
And so is he.
Okay.
26.
I remember thinking as your daughter, when I heard you lived in San Francisco in the mid to late 60s. I was like,
Wait.
did you go see the Doors? And were you in Haight-Ashbury? But you were in like...
Yes.
Yeah.
But the answer to that is yes.
Because you did go see the Doors, right?
Yes.
And I remember you saying, yeah, Jim Morrison, they were kind of okay, right?
I still love Jim Morrison.
Okay.
I was more than okay.
So you don't have kids yet.
No.
You're in San Francisco.
Yes.
And then I have a sister who is from this marriage. How did things start not going well?
Okay.
You're having probably a great time in San Francisco.
Yes.
I just don't know what that's like being at that age, married, in that culture.
Well, one thing I remember, people were smoking marijuana.
Oh, my.
Yeah. But I was pregnant, and I thought, I don't think I should do this if I'm pregnant. So I didn't.
Right.
But my husband thought, whoa, this is not like Indiana. So he got kind of into that. So when she was born in December of 1967, see, this is the height of the whole thing.
Were you working?
No, I never worked in California.
Okay, so then you moved there, didn't work, had my sister. No.
Yes.
Yeah.
We moved there in the summer of 1966. And she was born in December of 1967. So we moved out there, and where we ended up moving first was San Mateo, California, which is down on the peninsula, south of San Francisco. And we moved there because his job with IBM was going to be kind of between San Francisco and San Jose. And it turned out it was all in San Francisco. But we lived there, and I did the kind of things that wives did at that time. I joined little clubs like the Newcomers Club. But I met a nice group of women, because other women like me who were writing into college graduates did things like that then.
Right.
They didn't go out and work. I don't know why. But anyway, so she was then born in December of 1967. And that was, I didn't know anything about actually being the day-to-day thing of being a mother. And I realized now I was suffering from postpartum depression. My older brother was out there. I think that's one reason we thought San Francisco would be neat.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was in the Bay Area. And I went over just to get Joanne's advice and to say...
That's your brother's wife?
Yes.
Yeah. Who's had 2 kids at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got this baby, and I don't know what to... I took good physical care of her.
Yeah.
And I knew I loved her, but I was just... This is the whole process. This was not part of the plan or the dream that you were told about, that this is what's going to happen and live happily ever after.
You live happily ever after. You get married, you have a kid, it's all supposed to be great. And so you have no family out there except your brother that you're now talking to his wife. And it comes as a surprise, like, but I'm not happy.
Right.
I love my kid.
Right.
And I'm not happy. And back then we don't talk about postpartum depression or any of that. So you have no clue.
And you're not supposed to not be happy.
So when did that start showing up in your marriage? So now you have your daughter, you're out there.
It started showing up when we had
her
daughter.
Yeah.
Because how he reacted and interacted with her, I thought was not good.
Okay.
And in fact, when she got to be this cute little toddler of about 2 years old, I thought, I don't think this is healthy. I mean, I really felt this is not healthy.
Wow. I've never heard you say that.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I really felt that. I thought.
Meaning you were worried about your daughter?
Yes.
Okay.
So I can deal with this. I can handle him or not handle him or put him in the appropriate place. But because I was a stronger personality than he was. But no, I worried for her welfare. I really did.
So how did you choose to then get divorced? Because that wasn't, I don't know how common it was back then.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't the thing a nice woman
did.
Yeah.
So did you ask him for a divorce? How does this go at that?
I'm gonna leave you.
Okay.
Because
he was drinking?
Yes, he was drinking too much.
Mm-hmm.
And using a lot of, well, I think it was just pot.
Yeah.
There weren't the hard drugs around.
Okay.
And all the other strange things that had developed for that.
So he's drinking, using drugs, like you're actually scared for your daughter.
Yes.
And so you choose to go, I'm leaving you.
Yes.
You go back to Indiana?
I call my parents and tell them. They were wonderful. They were just very supportive. And they had thought he was wonderful because he was from DuPont, which was the same school they had both graduated from, and they had met there. And they thought, oh, well, you can't go wrong if you both graduated from DuPont University.
And I can't believe I went to college there, which is funny. But so I was like, I will never go there because you all went there. Okay, so they're surprised, but they're
totally
come home.
Supportive. Yeah. Well, you come home. So we get on the plane and fly back to Indiana. And we go in and we live with my parents. They have a big house.
Yeah.
Plenty of room for myself and my daughter. And they're very supportive. I mean, they really are. They were wonderful about all this. So while I'm there, my dad is saying, okay, so what are you going to do, Kathy? But he said, why don't you go to law school? He knew the dean of the law school. And then he calls him up. I just said, come on, Kathy, come in for an interview. So I said, okay. So I went in and turned out that this person, son, was no longer dean. He was on sabbatical. There was some other man there. And I go in and say, I really don't know why I'm here, but this is the story. And he says, oh, great. And we hit it off. He liked me, and I liked him. He said, you're fine.
They probably needed women, right?
They did. I was there at just the right time. I started law school in 1971.
Okay. So they needed women. They're like, you're smart. This is great. I remember you saying to me, and I don't know if this was your interpretation or if Grandpa, your dad, had said this to you, that you looked at, well, what can I do as a single mom that would support my daughter? Like, what job, did you think about that?
And I went, yes. I think I said that to you because that's what I thought. I thought, hey, this would work.
Okay.
Because it wouldn't be an 8 to 5:30 job.
Yeah.
I could maybe control my hours, and it would be a good thing to do with
and good money at that time, right?
Money for a single woman.
Yeah.
So that all appealed to me.
So then they accepted you.
Yes, they did. I hadn't taken the SATs or any requirements.
They just accepted you? You didn't have to
accepted me. In fact, I took the SATs about 2 months in, and I was in this room with...
They're not the LSATs.
Yes.
LSAT.
Yeah,
right?
LSATs. Yeah. So I was in the room with all these young guys that were just still in their senior year in college. And see, when I went back in 71, I had graduated in 61. I was 10 years older.
So you're 30? 31.
I'm 31.
Right.
But I don't look 31.
Right.
I mean, I've always looked...
I've got good genes from my mom.
Yeah.
So you look younger, but you have a kid. You've lived 10 years. You've been out in San Francisco. You've been married, separate. You're not divorced yet? You're not officially divorced yet?
Not officially.
Yeah.
No.
But you're out there.
Not
you're starting.
Formally,
You're taking tests with seniors in college. Mostly men, I would imagine.
And some of them are throwing up at the intermissions because they're so
nervous
into it and so nervous. And I think, what's the big deal? And I'm just doing this. I passed it, not with terribly high grades, but
enough to get in.
Well, I was
You're already in.
Enough
to just have the test on record.
Yeah, so it was fine. But I do remember that was an interesting thing. But anyway, so I start law school. So I would leave in the morning, probably about 8:30, and go to my classes.
Wow.
During the day, and then come home when we were done about 3. And then I'd watch my daughter and take care and go through supper. And then after supper, I would study. And it worked out okay. So I loved it. I really enjoyed law school. And I met your dad, I think it was about the second day of law school.
So let me tell you what I remember you tell me about it, and then I want you to tell the actual story. So you said it was the second day of law school, and they were having you go on a walk?
Walking outside for a class.
Yeah. And he stepped out of his shoe while you were talking to him? Will you just... I think it's just such a cute story.
His, like...
Birkenstock, probably, sort of sandal. Hippie sandal,
A hippie sandal, yeah. And he just, when he walked out of it, it didn't faze him. He was talking to a friend that he had just met. And he just reached down and picked up and put it back on and kept walking. I thought, oh, that is the coolest social reaction to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
He wasn't bothered by it a bit, and he kept his...
He wasn't embarrassed. He's like, this is just what's happening. So then, did you have a crush on him?
Well,
Were you wanting to get back with another guy at this point?
Oh, no.
No.
That wasn't in my mind. We sat very close to each other because of our last names.
Okay.
And I remember that we had submitted a paper, and most people were failing it, and I did just fine on it, and he did just fine on it. So, hey, look at that. Well, let's go out and have a drink together. I liked him immediately, and he liked me immediately.
And he is 8 years younger?
7.5.
7.5. Okay. 7.5.
So I am 31, and he is only, 24?
Okay.
He's a young guy.
Yeah.
But he's had a lot of social experience. I mean, he seems...
Well, and I would say my dad is an old soul. He's not like your typical guy you'd meet.
No, that's
so
right.
His age doesn't really matter, I would imagine. Like, just knowing him as my dad, that's what I would say. He doesn't,
yeah, that's right.
He's not like other men in the world, so he probably seems very different.
Yeah. That's a good way to say it. Yes,
and it's also, I would imagine, different, I would even say now, like for a young man to start being open to dating a woman that's been married and has a kid and is 7-8 years older in law school. Like, that takes also a different guy to not have weird stuff about that.
I guess so, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's that different that it just didn't faze him, probably. That's why I want to hear just more about that.
I think at one point he said to me early on in our relationship, it would have been after we were involved together for a year or two, that I had this lovely little daughter who was so interesting. That was like, whoa, that's a plus, not a negative. I mean, you're right. I think a lot of people would not have thought that all.
Okay, so I want to pause you there because, so then, and I'm going to have you fill in some of the blanks, but, so he thinks you continue dating. I was born in 1976, so I grew up with my older sister that we've been talking about all this time. And I want to say I was maybe 6, 7, or 8 years old, I can't remember. We were on some road trip to Florida for vacation.
Yeah.
Is when you told me that she wasn't actually my full sister.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so I didn't know she had a different dad. I didn't.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I knew sometimes in the summer we would go to this place where you guys knew people, but it was in Mary, Indiana. It would have been like not her dad, but the aunts and I just thought, we get to go to this summer cottage place. I don't know. It just seemed fun. No one ever talked about anything. Again, this is what's so different about the generations. But I remember specifically when you told me, and I didn't even know what that meant because now blended families and divorces, and it's way more normal when you talk about it. But back then I didn't know that. So when you told me that she wasn't I don't remember how you told me. She's your half-sister. But
I don't remember either.
But
no memory of
my dad adopted her. So I didn't, and you explained that, I remember crying and just thinking this is awful, the worst thing in the world, because I don't actually have a sister, and I thought I've always had a sister. And you were trying to explain, but no, she is your sister still. It's just different.
Sounds like I did a lousy job.
But no, this is what I find really interesting, is the difference in generations and the different with what's normal and how you handle things that go on in your life. So the way you handled the divorce was, okay, I am just going to leave. And we're going to do this. I'm going to start law school. You meet my dad. So you guys ended up, before you were married, I would love you to talk about, if you're okay with this, while you were maybe you were married before you had me, and you were both lawyers, and you worked with different people, and you guys used to have your address in the phone book. There used to be a phone book when you'd look up people.
Yes.
And so there was a man who maybe Dad had worked with, who was in a halfway house. Because you're not married yet. You were still dating.
Right. I don't know if he was in a halfway house or not, but he was at the end of his term of a prison sentence.
For some sexual abuse offense.
I don't know what the offense was. I think maybe it was just burglary, or I don't know that it was a sexual offense.
Okay, so you're out of law school.
It was a serious felony.
You're both practicing.
Yes.
You're dating.
Yes. We had taken courses. Our last year, our third year of law school, your dad and I together had taken courses on prisoner reform and how they should be treated better. And so we were involved with, that's how he got involved with PACT, Prisoner and Community Together. And I remember a couple times we went over to the Michigan City prison, which was only a half hour or 40 minutes away. Mm-hmm. And we'd go in, and the big doors would clang shut and all that. And that's how he met this person. I think it was still about to be released because he had completed his prison term. So that's how he came in contact with this person.
So I think that is the era you guys grew up in. And I know, and we can talk more about, but the lawyers you both became, you both were very much in the era of, we're doing this to really create change in the system, and I'm not doing it to make a lot of money. I'm not going to go work in a corporate, which you never did. And so here, that makes a lot of sense of why now we're going to this prison, and we're going to help the people. We're going to help them.
We're going to help all of society.
Then this guy that you guys meet at the prison looks up your address.
So he came to Valparaiso, and it was the summertime. We had just graduated in June, and he was helping. Dad was doing construction, because we take the bar exam, and then you have to wait till September till you find it. If you pass it, you can go on from there. So he was working construction, and I think this guy was working construction too with him. They were trying to help him get started back on a life after he'd had
prison.
At least 10 years, if not more, in prison. He was somewhat older. He was probably 40-ish.
And then what happened? I remember
your story.
I think I was about 16. And now that I have a teenage daughter, I can understand this a bit more. It was Halloween time. And I was like, why don't you like to go to Halloween haunted houses? Which is funny because my daughter now asks me the same thing. I was like, because I don't like going. It's not fun for me. And I was pushing you about, but why don't you like to be scared? That's so silly. And and I'm 16. I've never heard the story that I would like you to about. And you said, well, it's not fun to be scared when you've actually been raped. And I said,
oh, did I say it that way?
Yeah. And
that's how I felt. I don't want to be
it.
Scared again, because I was truly scared at one time.
And I had never known that before. And then you could imagine, I felt like the biggest asshole at 16, but you're still 16, but you're like, I get that. And then you barely told the story, and maybe did a little more. But I was like, I get that. I don't even like it. I have not had that happen to me, and I don't enjoy it at this age. I'm like, that's not fun for me.
About it. Yeah.
But when you said that, I was like, okay. Because I was like really pushing your buttons. I think that's probably why you responded back like that. And then you told me a little bit, and you said, yeah, I was raped and kidnapped by this guy. He's now in jail for life, and that's why I don't like being scared. And I think that's maybe all I ever got from you about what had happened, and maybe a little more later as I grew up. And this is what I want to say in this podcast too, is you never know what someone's been through. So here I am with a mom who I grew up not in a divorce. You were always this really strong working mom, and you were also always home when I got there from school. You would work on cases at night, but you and Dad were always present and there. And I had no idea of any of your previous life stuff, nor any of definitely not of this situation.
But it served you well, I guess, did it? Or not?
Well, it's been great to but also really admire what people have gone through, and you don't know what they've gone through and what they've used to change it. So that's why it was really a shock for me to go, well, that's an interesting way to find out about that from your mother, because we didn't talk about stuff. I have a very different relationship with my kids and my family, because I've made it a very much we talk about everything.
That's great.
What I understand is this guy, I don't even know if you know what caused it, but he decided to come to the house because he was to rape you, to kidnap you. It ended up in a kidnapping.
No, I don't know to this day what caused him at that moment, time to do that. But whatever, I think he saw an opportunity and realized this was something he could do. And he was obviously had a criminal mentality.
Yeah.
And so he came to the apartment where I was living with my daughter. And your dad wasn't there that evening or at that time.
He wasn't there.
Yes, he was.
I was going to say, there. I remember
because I was
there.
away for the evening. I was at my women's group. A guy drove up in my good old Oldsmobile.
And your daughter sleeping upstairs.
Well, it's a one flat.
Okay.
So she's in the bedroom. And Dad is kind of babysitting or watching her while I'm at my women's group. I come in, and there's Dad in a chair already tied up.
Wow. That's right. This is what I remember. So he's already tied up.
Yeah. And he'll have to tell you how that came about. I just have pictures. I don't have a minute by minute thing of it. I remember he got hold of me, said, I'm going with you, and Dad is saying, just go, do what he says. He takes as a weapon a pretty silver letter opener that Aunt Beth has given me for graduation, but that's his weapon that he's got against my neck. And he's grabbed my hands and he takes me out to the car.
Did he rape you before this? No.
He just takes me into the car. I think he tied up my hands somehow. So I was in the front seat of the car with him, and this is my car.
Yeah.
And he drives away, and we drive off into Porter County.
So he's driving at this point, and you're kind of tied up. Yeah.
And I don't know what he intends to do. He doesn't announce, this is what I'm going to do. I just knew this was a dangerous guy.
Yeah.
And here I am in this helpless position. And so there was a time that he rode around and said, stop the car. And back then, there weren't as many of these lights out that farmers now have, or people that live in the rural areas have these big lights that light up a whole area. It was very dark. And he stopped by the side of the road, and he pulled me into the back seat, and he did rape me. I resisted at first, but then I realized he's just going to really hurt me.
Yeah, I just have to survive.
So I kind of laid back and let it happen. And then he went again. And I remember this from the trial it came to be later on. Fred Grady was the prosecutor.
He was a family friend I grew up with. Is just a wonderful. And I later learned he was the man that prosecuted this guy. Yeah.
And he said, well, this guy says that you enjoyed it, that he wasn't, it was all consensual.
Right.
And
I'm
I
just
said,
tied
well,
up
that's
being
because,
kidnapped.
yeah. He said, well, good. I'm glad to hear you say that. And I thought, well, did you need to hear me say that? But anyway.
But back in the day, that actually had to be said, right?
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. I think it probably still is in rape trials.
It could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I know he had sex with me more than once. I think it was just twice. I don't really remember. I get back in the car, and then I said, well, let me drive. I know my way around here. And I didn't. But I drove into Lake County. And by this time, it's getting to be early morning. And there are kids forming on the street corners to be picked up to go to school. But they're all black. And I'm thinking, how would I respond to me jumping out and saying, get this guy? Will they believe me? Will they be believed if they tell cops this later on? So I just kept driving. I don't know where I was. Somewhere in Lake County. About to get back onto a 94 or 80 or one of those. When there was this police car pulled off to the a side road.
The side lane, sort of, like when there's like a off and on ramp sort of thing.
And so I saw it. Okay, this is my chance. So as I'm driving, I slow it way down. And then I jump out of the car and run up to the police car. I'll tell him, help me, this guy has kidnapped me. And then it wasn't until I said to him, he's an ex-convict, that the guy looked at me and said, oh. And then he jumped out of the car, went back, and as I told you,
you don't remember?
I don't remember the details. I don't remember if there was a struggle or if he just easily arrested him. He seemed pretty passive at that time. So, I mean, like, maybe he knew, okay, this is what I wanted to do. I did it. I'm going back. And he'd spent so many years in prison, maybe he just thought, okay.
I'm going to go back.
Yeah.
You skipped over a part that I don't think I've made this up, but you had told me at one point in that process of driving through the middle of the night that he started to go, uh-oh, I'm going to get the death sentence.
Yes.
I should just kill you anyway.
Yes.
And you had to talk him out of that.
I did. Yes, you're right. That did occur. And I said, look at, and I was doing
So he says this to you. He says, I might as well just kill you anyway?
Right. And I said, oh, no. There's a big difference. I don't know what shit I was telling him. I'm trying to think. But it makes a huge difference. of what you do. That rape or whatever.
So far you've just raped and kidnapped. This is not, you don't need to kill me.
Right. That murder is a whole different thing. And in my mind, what was going on? I've got to stay alive for my daughter. Because her father, who was, in my mind at that time, I thought worthless, set out in California and never going to be the real support she needs. I've got to stay alive for her kid. And I know that's what was motivating me.
Wow.
And I went on this discussion about, hey, it's bad, but it's not all that bad. You can handle that. I remember having a long discussion about that, yes.
How did he respond to that?
Well, he sat there and listened to it. He heard it.
Wow.
Well, I'm just talking as fast as I can.
So then he doesn't end up murdering you.
No.
And so then he gets caught. He spends life in prison. He ends up dying in prison.
I don't know if he got a life sentence or not, but it was a long one. And yes, there were many years later, your dad and I were at a lawyer's banquet of some kind over in Lake County. And we were talking to, the judge. I think it was the judge who had presided over my trial. And we brought up this case, and he said, he died in prison 4 years ago. That I think he was attacked and assaulted by other prisoners. He didn't die naturally. Dad and I were just so relieved because we didn't know that. We would have been informed, but we were not. And it was just because I know I had in the back of my mind that his son might come back sometime.
Well, that's what I want to ask you about, because that level of, I think when I first found out about it and you saying, I don't like to go to haunted houses, because when you have something that traumatic happen, you did a very good job of what I would say growing up with you, I wouldn't have known that would have happened to you. Mm-hmm. But you were very aware, I think, from saying that, I don't need to be stimulated in any way that's scary, because it's so still in my subconscious. And I still don't like
and you still to this day, scary movies or horror movies or anything like that.
But so, in this day and age, people go to all sorts of different things to change, and there's lots of amazing things to change trauma and PTSD. Back then, you chose a very different. You didn't go to therapy, did you? You've told me, like, you had this. You mentioned women's group. I want you to say what that was and how you chose to deal with it. I don't even know what it's like to deal with an event back then.
Mm-hmm. No, there was no therapy. But we had this group of women that had started meeting when I was in law school. And we met once a week. And we got one of these big jugs of wine. Oh, lousy stuff. Carlo Rossi or something like that.
I remember you having those big,
And we would meet every week on a Thursday night. And we just talk about everything. This was during the women's consciousness raising period. So some of us already had kids. And some of them were not. They were still in law school. But we had a close connection, and it was very helpful.
So that was different than the women you first met out in San Francisco. Like this, you guys actually talked about real stuff going on a lot. Yeah.
And this was the first time, because this was when women were talking to women about real stuff.
Wow.
And not putting up this facade. And this is what we're supposed to be like. Like, I never used a swear word until I was, I don't know how old. Because nice women didn't do that. We weren't even supposed to acknowledge that we knew what it meant.
Wow.
So we didn't know what that meant.
And even in your 20s, like the women out in California, you didn't talk about sex life.
Oh, no.
Really?
Even then.
Okay.
And Haight-Ashbury was going on down the
street. And you didn't talk about your sex life?
No.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
No.
But now so now you have this women's group.
Yes.
They all know this has happened. Do you come to them and tell them what has happened?
Yes, because it happened. Well, we had this women's group before this happened. This happened just after I graduated, but the women's group then continued on. Some of the ones had graduated and left the area, but yes, we had this very supportive group. And I still remember my good friend Pat coming and picking me up and taking me, and I took a bath, and that's where we discovered I had this huge bruise on my thigh that I didn't even know I had gotten.
Sustained, yeah.
Sustained is a better word. So they were there. They all knew about it, and we all talked about it, And I could remember And we were discussing the men in our lives, and they were saying, well, my husband did this, my husband. And I remember saying, well, the man I love. And they all thought that was so wonderful that I said I was talking about Don, your dad, because we weren't married yet. So anyway, yes, so we talked about it, what happened. And I can remember having a dinner with my high school friends, 3 or 4 of the women friends I'd been close to in high school. And one of my friends named Peggy said to me, well, did you kind of enjoy it? And I thought, oh, God, she's read these romantic novels.
Are you serious?
Yes. You know, where you have the pulling the bodice away and, oh, surrender. She actually said that to me.
What did you respond?
I can't remember what I said, but I know I was angry and really put her down. But that shows the thinking that was still going on.
Wow. And that's in a good friend group. Like, that's just, she actually really asked you that.
Yeah.
As a friend.
Yes.
Thinking that might be a yes.
She just wanted to hear what her friend said.
So how do you think my dad dealt with that at the time? Like, if this would have happened, if that would happen nowadays, I know this happens all the time across in all sorts of, but nowadays with news and social media, and here's someone that just graduated from law school and an ex-person kidnapped, it would be all over if it could, you know. Mm-hmm. This is something you're dealing with privately and with your friends, and you and Dad hadn't married yet. Obviously,
there was a headline in the little White Messenger newspaper.
Yeah, so
34-year-old gets raped, or somebody kidnapped and raped, or something. And they thought maybe there was a.
They didn't use your name, right?
I think they
did. Or did they? Okay.
I think they did, and they thought maybe it was to get a ransom, to get money from my father. There's total speculation.
Yeah.
But the way they talked about me, and then they mentioned Don, I know that was part of his thinking, this is crazy. We are as close as any married couple, or we have a relationship that's strong as any married couple, and yet I'm put aside and hardly referred to. And I think that was part of his motivation to say, let's get married. We need to announce to the world what our relationship is, because all this newspaper reporting did not acknowledge that at all.
That he was even around?
They mentioned that he was kind of there or something, but it wasn't.
But I can't remember how you were kidnapped in front of him. Yes. And I don't know what he did afterwards, but your daughter's sleeping in another room. He has to stay there to be with her.
I think he gets her, and they go down to the police station.
Right. So you really just, you didn't live your life as a rape victim by any means.
No.
You and my dad got married. How soon after that?
This all happened in September, I think. We got married November 30th.
Of what year?
Of the same year.
75? 4? I was born in 76.
Oh, 74. 74, yeah.
And so this is what many would call a majorly traumatic event.
Yes, it was.
And you decide to get married a couple months after?
Yes.
And not go to therapy?
Yes.
How do you
but
and
we
Dad
had
talk
a
about
very strong relationship for 3 years prior to that.
Prior to that, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's more like, we're going to do this.
We've been talking about doing it, and then it's how he referred to him in the paper is how I always saw part of it. We need to do this. And he was very supportive.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess not everybody would be, would they? But he was.
He was different, yeah.
He was immediately.
And then you had these great women friends?
Yes, and they all were.
And did you continue to talk about it? Like if you later had something come up or felt weird, or did that not happen?
It did not seem to come up that often. But I think if it ever did, we did.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't ever hidden again. They were all aware of it and knew it. And really, it was their support and help. I didn't feel like I was a victim. I thought this was this thing that came out of
nowhere.
And it was awful and terrible. We went through a trial. We had to go back. I remember going over to Hammond and being in the trial.
You have to take the stand?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the guy was cross-examining me and saying, didn't you think it was odd that he did this? And didn't you think it was odd that he did that before that? And I said, no, I thought it was stupid. And I still remember that was the best answer I could have given, because they're saying, don't do a mental derangement excuse.
Oh, right. They're trying to get an insanity plea.
Yeah,
probably.
insanity.
Yeah.
No, it was just drunk. It was stupid of them.
Right.
I still feel good about that, though, because they convicted him.
Yeah. Because they were trying to go for that, for insanity.
I think so.
Yeah. Based on those. That's smart. And that's what I think is so, I would say, what I found in my life too. It's my relationships with my friends over the years. And they've changed who they are, and they've changed, but that have gotten me through so many things.
Yes.
And they don't have to have a degree or a thing.
No.
They're just there and listening with no judgment.
Yes.
Like, I get that's what happened. And you, I would always say, just like how you talk about this, like, well, no, it just happened. I'm not going to be a victim, and it was this weird event, and you don't linger on it, and you had different ways of dealing with it at the time. So I find out about that when I'm 16. I found out about my sister wasn't my full sister when I'm maybe 8. And then when I was 20-something, I remember, so as you said, you were living in Indiana. I, at the time, was living in Chicago. I grew up about an hour from Chicago. And I was living there and waitressing. And I was home for a week. I don't remember what. Just visiting. And you had a doctor's appointment.
Right. And you went with me.
And I went with you. And I just remember, like, it was just like, I can take you. Like, Dad wasn't going to take you. It was the doctor's office that I did my pediatric appointments in.
Yeah. Yes.
So I was like, I can take you and go in with you. I had no idea what we were even going
I don't think I did either.
in for. Right. So we go into the office, and then you want to talk about, yeah.
My armpit. Are you feeling my armpit?
Yeah.
And my first memory of all this is I'm standing, and we're in the kitchen pointing at my calendar that I always had written, pointing up to when something was going to happen. Oh, God. And so you felt it, too, in my armpit.
That's right.
So, Mom, you need to call and do something about that right away. So we went in within a day or two. I mean, it seems like it was almost immediately. And sure enough, he said, that's not good. We need to do something about that. And we went into Jack Cooper, was the surgeon. And he said, yeah, we need to remove that. I think that's cancerous. But you were right there with me.
I remember the calendar thing and going, you need to get that checked out. But I remember the appointment, and this is where I just like talking about, because our memory is really amazing what our brain remembers and then blocks out. I remember going in and sitting down, and I felt like, this is my hindsight, probably having blocked out, not having a clue what was coming. And I was sitting down, and he's saying, we did the test, and it's actually is malignant. It's not benign. And that's where you had said to me, because I remember being caught off guard, because I didn't know I feel like I didn't even know that's the appointment we were going to, or I didn't know we were going to get that information back at that time. Because I remember thinking, why is it just me and Mom? Like, why isn't Dad there?
It was just the two of us.
It was just the two of us. So I remember thinking, okay, I can handle this, sort of.
Well, you handled it beautifully, yes.
And I remember you saying to me later, this is where we kind of have these moments in our life, like when you talk about your rape, where you just sort of go, I've got this, and it's kind of a beyond thing. But I remember going, okay, like if this is what's going on with your body, we're going to handle this. Like, okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't cry. I don't think I cried at all.
No, I don't think you did. Yeah. We were okay.
But I also really received what was going on. I was like, okay, this is what is happening.
Yes.
It wasn't and you said later, I was really grateful. Well, you said like that I didn't deny what was happening.
Right. You did not. You accepted it. Yeah. And that was really helpful for me. That was really helpful. Dad accepted it too. And I have this scene in my mind of us lying in bed just hugging each other and crying.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want this to be what it was. But then from then on, we had this wonderful doctor. We went in every week for
Birth or chemo? You did chemo first, right? And then radiation, or vice versa?
No, chemo first. But that was after I'd had, where they went in and actually excised.
A lumpectomy.
And then right after that, we went on a vacation out to and then I started the chemotherapy, which was every week.
Yeah. Well, what I will say is, I was in my early 20s. I was living in Chicago, and I was waitressing at the time. So I remember used to come in for chemotherapy at the hospital in Chicago because you were lucky enough to have a health plan in America where you could choose a doctor. And you were in a small town in Indiana, and there was much better cancer providers in Chicago.
And we had the good friend Pat Terrell, who worked at that was called Cook County. It's now called something else, but a hospital in Chicago connected with Rush.
Yep.
And she knew important people, and she worked in a position that was high up enough. I mean, there was a interaction there. She said, you need to get to this woman, this doctor, Melody Cobley, who was doing research in breast cancer area, and to get to Rush. And so we got in there right away after we found out it was indeed cancer.
And you had the best.
Oh, we did.
The best. And that alone, and the woman you're mentioning, Pat Terrell, was in your women's group.
Yes.
You guys took care of each other in a way, and you had connections. So you're not sitting in a small town in Indiana going, I guess I'm going to get this chemo and radiation. You got to go to the best of the best.
Yes, we did.
And what I noticed is, on two things. One, you and my dad, I would say that was the most, I grew up with you guys not showing a lot of affection for each other. I would say physically, like you weren't the parents that like hugged and kissed and that sort of thing.
But we were very close.
But you were always very close and great friends. But during that period was the time I saw you guys have a very different shift in your relationship.
I think we did. And we have ever since then.
Yeah. And that was, and I remember you saying to me, so you had the chemo, so I was waitressing in Chicago, and you would come in, and I had only heard the stories or seen movies where after chemo you're throwing up all day. And by this time you had very good doctors.
Yes.
They had done a really good job with your chemo, and you guys would actually come in and have a little snack and a glass of wine after your chemo. And I would see you every week.
Yes.
And you would come into my restaurant. I was on Michigan Avenue, the main shopping street in Chicago. And I think for you guys, it was a really special memory, and same for me. And I
every Friday afternoon.
Every Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
And then I would see you there.
For 6 months we did that.
Yeah. And then you did radiation.
After that.
And I didn't grow up in a super religious family, but Dad used to teach the Sunday school, and you said, this is how different. Well, everyone in church, they do announce my name on Sunday services, and they're all praying for me. And you were like, but I think that's great because everyone praying for you probably really helps. I thought, yeah, it does. It doesn't matter if you call it prayer or energy, or everyone has a different word for it, but there were so many people contributing to you.
Yeah.
During that time, because you and Dad had made so many connections, and you guys are so special and different. And I remember you going, I don't know what they're doing, but yeah, you can pray for me. This is all going on.
I remember saying that. Yeah. And I had a high school friend who had converted to Catholicism because she married a Catholic man. And she had sent me a note saying, and this is someone I hadn't been close to for 10 years or something more, that she had sent some money to some nuns around Rome that were all lighting candles or something. Great! I got those guys going for me too.
Yeah.
I may not believe it, but she believed it, and it all worked together to help.
Yeah. Well, one of the women who was in your women's group, when I lived in Chicago, and this was a few years after that, I was going from apartment to apartment and finding good deals and places to live, and I would work for a bit as a waitress and then travel overseas. So when I would come back, I'd always be looking for a new apartment. Yeah. And one of your friends from your women's group lived in Chicago because she was a midwife.
Yes.
And so she had an apartment in Chicago and a home back in Indiana, but when she was on call for births, she had an apartment in Chicago. And so I actually lived with her for a bit because she had an extra bedroom. And I was just coming back from a trip. Oh, Linda, I loved her so much.
Yes.
And so I lived with her for a bit. And she wasn't there often. She would only be there. I mean, I think I barely saw her. So I got this 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago. She was barely there. And I remember hearing this from her. She said, one of the things that's amazing about your mom, and I remember you telling me this, though. You said, one thing my doctor told me, please don't go online and look up this cancer.
Right.
I don't want you to look anything about it on Google. Like, I don't want you to, this is what we're doing. And don't look it up. And later, Linda said to me, she goes, I'm so glad your mom listened to that because, you know, the type of cancer she had like a 8 to 9% survival rate.
Right.
And had you seen that, this is where our thoughts actually create what shows up. If someone told me you have an 8% chance of surviving, that was the opposite of what your mentality and mindset was. I was around you and just like, yeah, I'm going to chemotherapy, I'm going to do radiation, people are praying for me, people are lighting candles, I don't know what they're doing, I've got a good relationship with my husband, and you just kept going. And I remember you going on a trip to Italy.
Yes.
With 2 of your women friends from your women's group.
Yes.
And were you you had just finished all of the therapy?
Yes.
Yeah.
I had just completed the radiation and all that. And Kathy, who's still one of my dear friends.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
Her son was in Rome at the time doing something, and she said, let's go to Italy. And I think she was suggesting it, thinking, this may be the last good trip I take. I said, yes, let's do it. So we did it.
Yeah.
And I know by that time, my hair had, I was trying to get a little bit back. But
you had like a little buzz.
A little buzz when we went over there. Yeah. So the 3 of us, and then Pat, the third one, was the one that helped so much. So the 3 of us flew into Milan and then went to Florence, and that's where Joe was staying, her son. And we had a wonderful time. We were there for 11 days. Did Florence, drove through Tuscany in a car, went to Rome, then up to Venice. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful trip. That was in 2001.
2001. Okay, so you've been in remission for
23 years.
For 23 years. And this is the other thing I just want to highlight. In all of these stories, I didn't grow up in an environment of I'm a rape survivor, and I also didn't grow up in I'm a breast cancer survivor environment. You never took on either of those points of view, yet you, quote, defeated those both in a very different way.
So what I don't understand people that want to be a survivor. I mean, that's not me.
So how do you see yourself?
I don't know that I've ever delved deeply, and I'd have a good answer for you. And who I am, I believe in my genetics. I'm the daughter of my mother and father, who I admired greatly, both for different reasons, and they were very different people. I did what I did. I accomplished what I accomplished on my own. I wish I could have maybe done some other things, gone out and broadened. But it was a time when women just didn't, and were sort of confined to a certain role. And within that structure, I did pretty well. And I was very fortunate to meet your dad. Mm-hmm. I feel that has been a wonderful positive in my life. And he's just a wonderful, positive person. But I think he also needed the right kind of mate, and I think I was it. Mm-hmm. So together, it's been delightful. And so who am I? I am what I am, and I don't think of myself as a survivor, because I think that's limiting. I am Kathy Vinsky Evans, and I have always enjoyed life. I've always been positive. Life is good. It'll work out. See, you are a blessing to me. Yeah. I am so fortunate to have the daughters I have. And I'm so pleased that you're as contented and happy and outgoing and looking on as you are.
I remember one time asking you, you sort of were like, well, what are you doing exactly? Like it was, and I said, well, I guess it's kind of stuff to kind of get more to who you are, like who you are as a being. And you're like, well, I know who I am. I'm Kathy, and I'm this and this and this and this and this. And I just remember kind of laughing because I was like, oh, or you read one of the books, and you're like, well, this this is something you'd find in the self-development section.
Yes,
like, I'm good with that. But what I also loved at the same time is, I think because like what you said, you and Dad also never had a problem with spending a lot of money on my private college tuition.
Oh, no.
And me saying, yeah, I'm not going to get a job. I'm going to go to London for a year and waitress. Yeah. After you spend all this money, you're like, okay, that sounds great. Like, you also supported me not knowing what the fuck I was doing for a while.
Right.
For a long, and still, like, just going, but we know you always had a lot of confidence and faith, and if that's what you want to do it. And I remember when I was getting divorced and you were upset, and I said, wait, Mom, you went through this too. You were with a person that looked really good on the outside, and you knew something different. I hope that of anyone you could understand. I remember you really taking that in, you going, wait a second, I'm sorry. You're right. I have been through this. It's okay. Because you guys had a little bit of resistance, which I think all parents do. Make sure you're making the right choice. But I said, of anyone, I think you should get this. The idea we have when we're younger, I didn't realize how much I had bought that picture either. Because I really love being a mom. And I think I very much knew I wanted to have kids.
Yes.
And I don't think I fully understood that box I was buying as perfect. Like, you find a person, you get married, and you're just happy. And I was like, whoa, that's not what this is like at all when you're here. Very much want to be a mom. And this part probably didn't match up with any of the other parts of me.
Yeah.
You guys paved a way when you describe college and getting divorced and law school and just going, you were one of the first women in law school. And your generation paved a way for what when we were born, we just got a key without having to ask for it. Mm-hmm. We got given all these keys easily because your generation opened them up. Your job is not to open up this one. Ours is.
Yeah.
And now I see with my kids, okay, and we get so frustrated with our family members for wanting them to have done something different, but you guys did your own whole job. And I look at it not just like politically, but also energetically and universally. That creates a shift in the planet. That then the next generation comes along and they're here to shift something else. And that's why you guys were in the 60s in Vietnam, and then like every generation is different. That's why I'm really curious about what my kids are going on. Mm-hmm. I don't understand it in the same way they do, but their generation is creating a shift, just like mine did.
And you're observing it.
And I'm observing it and taking it in. Yeah. And I'm not making you wrong, and I'm trying to get them to like, hey, we joke about me being the mom, like, I'm not going to know all this, but I'm also really curious about what you're doing. And I'm grateful for the keys you gave me, because I think I had an easier time choosing divorce. I had an easier time going, I am going to create. I had a mom that was really successful and always created her own money and like led the family. I didn't have a problem with that. Mm-hmm. You never had weird body. I've been amazed to realize how many women stuff they have with like their looks and their body. You never had that. I was like, oh, I had a really like wonderful mom who was also attractive, but she didn't have weird things about her body or her image, so I didn't inherit any of that.
Oh, good.
Which is unique. I didn't realize it was unique till I was around a lot of other people,
and I thought
that
was unique either.
Really special. It's really special. You didn't compete with me for men.
No.
I'm just saying, it's amazing to go, thank you for what your generation did. And then to go, of course, I don't expect you to be where I am. And I don't expect my kids, I don't expect to be where they are. But when we actually received the gifts of like the doors you guys opened, that we all just were beneficiaries of. Yeah. And now to really get curious about the next generation, it might seem weird. They're opening doors that their generation is meant to open. And it's just, I'm really glad that to hear those stories, because I get to hear it from your perspective and what that was like for you in that time. So
well, I'm just amazed that your daughters can think that you weren't with it. You're so far ahead of me. I just think, wow, I'm impressed that you
I'm still a mom. I'm like, I'm the dorky mom. I might be kind of a cooler mom, but not like they're like, oh, jeez, Mom. I'm like, okay, this is what's supposed to happen. I will just enjoy this and still be.
Well, I think you saw it happen in your own life, so you can look back and say, that's right. That's how it went.
And it's really beautiful. And Nellie likes rap music, and she likes today's rap music, and I listen to it, and I hear some of the lyrics. I'm like, oh my God. And then I was like, I'm going to go back and listen to what I used to listen to in high school. So I actually even asked friends, I said, hey, can you give me some rap, like old school rap? I want to give Nellie the history of where this all came from. And so everyone's giving, like, it's a Facebook post. Everyone's giving me great advice. And nowadays I go on Spotify and I look up all these songs that I used to love. And I'm listening to them and I love them, right? Because I loved them at 14, 15, 16. Yeah. And I'm listening to the lyrics. And they are as offensive and as about sex and women denigration. I was like, I just love the beat and the music.
Yes.
So I was so cool. So I made Nellie a playlist of my old rap music.
Yes.
And now I can listen to hers, and it's really fun. Because I'm like, of course you like that.
You had one song that was played. It's something about voices under the bed or something like that. And I thought, oh, my God. And I listened to it. Oh, that's a good beat.
It's the beat.
Yeah.
And I finally realized, of course you're supposed to. It's wonderful. And they're exposed to so many different things, and we've had lots of open conversations, which is part of the reason I wanted to have this with you, because I was like, I remember certain things. We haven't talked a lot about all of this. And so I just want to say thank you for being willing to talk about it. Now we have it as like a family archive, and or for anyone that it can contribute to, of just...
And is this what you wanted?
That's it.
That's
what I'm saying. It's not an interview. It's a conversation.
Oh, it was wonderful. And I feel better. I feel closer to you.
Yeah, me too.
Because of this. And I've always been impressed with you. I'm very proud of you. And I thought you were such a beautiful combination of Dad and me. Because he's got some beautiful qualities that I just admire so much. And I think you inherited them. He's a wonderful person.
Yeah, yes. He is. As are you guys.
Oh.
And Nia's are really... I'll have to do a podcast with him. That will be another one.
Yes, you should.
Yeah.
Because you'll love that.
Yeah.
You'll get wonderful answers from him.
I know.
They'll be much more philosophical and
thought. We'll do that one next. Okay. Thank you so much, Mom.
Thank you. Love you.
I love you too. I hope you got something out of that episode. If you like this podcast, please share it with someone you know who'd find it useful or interesting, and subscribe so that you can listen to past and upcoming shows.